On this edition of To My Way of Thinking, we're going to be speaking with Stanley Scott, Managing Director of the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank here in Jacksonville, Florida. Stanley has been a bit of a thorn in the side for many African American leaders, as well as Jacksonville's political leaders in general. His opinions vary, but they're always the same, based upon many of the discussions and theories of Carter G. Woodson, and quite frankly, many other more conservative African-American leaders throughout the history. I thought we'd start this off with a discussion with Stanley Scott. I think you'll find his take on things quite interesting. One. Thanks for joining us today. With us, of course, is Stanley Scott of the African American, and you're going to have to give me the entire title. Give me the title of the organization that you write about and talk about, and tell us a bit about that organization.
Yes, my name is Stanley Scott. I'm with the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank, located in Jacksonville, Florida. And we have 4 pillars. One is rebuilding the family infrastructure. Number 2 is Afrocentric education. Number 3 is preventive economics. Preventive economics. No, sorry about that. That's my mistake. Number 3 will be preventive health. Sorry about that. And number 4 will be collective economics for the African American community. So everything that we do with the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank is bringing information together and strategy for the African American community. Our only concern is the African American community, and that's nationwide.
So why such a sharp focus in 2022 as we sit today? Why such a narrow focus when the issues of the African Americans are so broad? I mean, and now we are, while at one time many did crowd back into from the Republican Party, as an example, moved from the Republican Party at the end of the Franklin Roosevelt era into squeeze into the Democratic Party going forward, and now many of them, and now they've just as many have moved back to the Republican Party for a number of reasons. Why such a narrow focus in 2022 when it could be a bit broader?
Right. Well, it's very important in the African American community because of 400 years of disenfranchisement in the African American community, and it's very important that the African American community understand where they are in this time. If you look through the history, because of Jim Crow and other issues in the African American community, we've been held back. That's why it's very important that African Americans understand the power that they have and the resources that are available to them, so they can empower themselves.
But I mean, really, again, this is 2022. Everybody's got, most people, except for a few places in Mississippi and Alabama, have access to the internet and cell phones and all of the accoutrements of life. Now, true, some people in our age group, I'll put me in that other age group, don't completely understand all of the new technologies that are out there. But for the most part, African Americans across the spectrum have access to information, technology, education, money that they didn't have access to 50 years ago, for example, not to mention 60, 70, 80 years ago. So again, what more can you tell folks about their empowerment that they don't already know or shouldn't already be doing?
Well, number 1 will be rebuilding the self-esteem of the African American community. Nobody's really addressing that issue because there's, like I said, 400 years of pain in the African American community that we have not addressed. Now we hear people talking about mental health, but it's different from a Caucasian and an African American. And people that throw that word out there, mental health, but they don't understand the many levels of mental health when it comes to the African American community. So that's why it's very important that the think tank makes sure my people understand the resources, understand the power that they have today, to make sure that we are at the table. In African American, with all the opportunity that we have today, we are still not at the table.
Now, in your writings, you put a great deal of, I'm going to use the word pressure, on current African American leaders to do better, to do their job, to lead better. What, focusing on local leadership, which is what a great deal of your writings are about, and I'll use the term even criticisms are about, what are the top things that concern you about African American leadership that you think is not there?
Number one is rebuilding the family. That's the most important thing for the African American community need to be doing today. As you mentioned before, we have many opportunities available to us, but you don't see those opportunities. When you talk about the GDP, if you look at the GDP, it hasn't changed since slavery. And African American leadership, every time I look around, they're talking about the broad part of changing America, but what about at home? Now, when I was coming up, my parents taught me that charity begins at home. Take care of yourself first before you talk about world issues. So when it comes to the African American leadership, I don't see that with the African American leadership. I see them spending a lot of time looking out for themselves, but not the community, especially within Jacksonville, where, according to New York Life Insurance Company, we spending $15-16 billion as consumers in Jacksonville. But if you look around, what do you see?
Well, you know, when I was involved more deeply with the NAACP and civil rights issues here in Jacksonville and throughout Florida, the issue of Black leadership, or who was in Black leadership, was fairly well designed. I knew if I needed to get to a large gathering of people or get the word out to a large gathering of people, I knew I had to go to the ministerial community, AME Church and progressive Baptist churches, church pastors, the ministerial alliances. I knew I had to go to them and talk with them individually and collectively and get their support to help move the ball and get their input. Then I knew that legislatively, if there's something we had to get passed, I knew I had to knew which political leaders I needed to talk to get the ball rolling, to tell me how to get the bill filed, and would at least file the bill for me, even if they didn't think it was going to pass.
Right.
I don't see that, and business leadership would sort of follow. There were a few business leaders in our community who were bold enough and brave enough to risk their dimes and quarters to be on the front line with it. But I don't see that. I don't get that feel now as to Black leadership that we had just 30 years ago and beyond. So when you talk about Black leadership, are you talking specifically about politicians? Because because I don't see that much of your writing. Most of you come down pretty hard on these politicians that we have in office, but I don't read that terribly much about the other pieces of the pie. So who's Black leadership as far as you're concerned?
Right now, it's just the politician and education. When it comes to, we don't have a business leadership in Jacksonville for African Americans. When it comes to the pastors. The pastors are discombobulated. They are the Republican Party, Democratic Party, when they should not be in any party. They should be more socially engaged in making the community better. Because as you said before, there's opportunity, more opportunity for African Americans today. And I don't see pastors being more socially engaged. Now I just saw where ICARE is stepping up when it comes to the sheriff, and that's a great thing that they are doing.
But they couldn't get a meeting with him.
Well, they don't really need a meeting with him. I would recommend them that I wouldn't worry about that because Jacksonville, when it comes to JSO, it's the governor and the state attorney, the Florida state attorney, that have power over the sheriff.
Yeah.
So that's where I will go. I will be talking to the governor, regardless of what governor is in place. That's where I will be going because they are the decision makers for Duval County.
Even though in this day and time, the governor only speaks to those African Americans who are in lockstep with his philosophy, not so much the philosophy of his party, but only those who are in lockstep with his philosophy. So,
right.
So that again kind of puts you out to pasture because you're not going to get a meeting with this governor.
No, you don't have to have a physical meeting with them today because we have technology. So we can tell our story. Mm-hmm. And there's many good people around the state of Florida that will engage us too, and be, in fact, for our concerns. But there's many ways to reach out to the governor without being physically in front of him. Mm-hmm. And we are not taking advantage of that technology to bombard him with information and reach out to the other leadership when it comes to the state, like the senator of the state, and also the Democratic and the Republican Party.
Now, one of the things that strike me, and I'm still going to stay along this particular line about the African American Economic Think Tank, that strikes me is that you appear to follow in the Carter G. Woodson vein,
right,
of thought, which right. is do it yourself.
Right.
Be less dependent upon them. Those who have not learned to do for themselves and had to depend solely on others never obtain any more rights or privileges in the end than they did in the beginning, says Dr.
Right.
Carter G. Woodson. Well, that's hard to argue with, but are we still in a time where we are dependent upon others?
Yes, because our leadership is more dependent than you can do both. You can deal with the government, and then you can also work in your community. The real power is in your community, like in Jacksonville, where you have so many African Americans. When you talk about 7, 8, 9, and 10, and part of Allerton, there's opportunities in those areas to create opportunity for the African American community. But we are not addressing those issues here. We are not creating business opportunities. No matter how much information I bring to the African American community, they are not reading any information. I'm talking about the leadership. I'm in city council. I put in over 200 hours last year in city council in those meetings. And the reason why we do that is so we can bring information to the community. And from our research, it showed that African Americans have a golden opportunity because of the law, because civil rights laws, 13, 14, and 15 Amendment. We are not applying those laws to get equity in this country. I mean, in this city.
Now you're saying you're not seeing any progress, or you're not seeing the kind of progress that you want, that you would like to have in the African American community? Because again, the issues that we discuss here in Jacksonville are nationwide. Even in Atlanta, they're still wrestling with these same arguments, which is, the capital of the South and the Black Mecca of the South. They're still wrestling with the same thing, and they've got Black billionaires living in Atlanta, but they still have the same problem. So you're saying you're not seeing the progress in the African American community, or just the progress that you'd like to have?
No, don't see it in the community at all.
Really?
Just like you say, that's nationwide, and then not just in Jacksonville. With the African Americans, especially with the amount of money, where we at $1.4 trillion in the nation, and we should be able to create opportunity. Where are our corporations? Yeah, we have a few small corporations, but it's not enough to impact our community. So yes, I'm not seeing any change. Well,
what are you talking about specifically? Because I mean, we had we had at one point, when we look back at the first McDonald's franchise that came here, that was owned by an African-American couple up there on Kings Road and US One, we all remember that. And of course, what they were able to do in terms of hiring young men and women, and many of them went on to college and that sort of thing. There were a couple of others that other companies came to. But what are you talking about specifically? Because are you talking about having Black billionaires here that will employ only African Americans or young African Americans? What are you talking about specifically? Because we've got a heck of a lot of Black-owned businesses here that are employing people and are making money and have been doing it now for several generations. So what specifically are you talking about, Stanley?
Yeah, well, that part is not true. When you say that, when you're talking about, when we look at the African American community after slavery, we was a 0.5% or 1%. Today, I'm talking about the GDP. When you look at the GDP today, it hasn't changed. That's in the African American community. Now we have quite a few African American, but how many right here in Jacksonville are millionaires? When I'm talking about gross millionaire businesses, you have a lot of mom and pop operation, and you, like I said, you have a few gross millionaires, business millionaires. But when we talk about making an impact, and I'm saying when I say make an impact, be able to write a check, not many African American businesses can write a check.
Well, I'm going to explore that particular theory in coming weeks on this show. Now, I think you have to know that certainly with the advent of the NFL into our market now for more than 20 years, we have a number of players and coaches who have retired out of the NFL and who are in fact millionaires and putting some money into the market. Many of them in business ventures. I'm going to be seeking them out to test that process and see in fact what they're doing business wise, not just philanthropic wise, but business wise in the community. But since the NFL has been here, we got a heck of a lot of Black millionaires living in Jacksonville and in and around Jacksonville here. And I dare say the football player that graduated from Yulee High School just up the road here, Derrick Henry, I'm sure he's going to be signing a contract that's going to be north of $10 or $20 million after this next season. So I'm going to be looking at that. But you're saying that you haven't seen that, or the evidence that the investment by African-American millionaires in Jacksonville is not evident. What are you saying?
Well, let's talk about the NFL. When we talk about NFL, yeah, we have quite a few here, and most of them here during the season. But the real connection is where they're from. And we don't see an impact when you have the NFL here, especially when they come to African American. Most of them live on the South Side, in the deep part of the South Side. So they're not even much coming into the African American community. For example, with that many football players, African American football players, you don't see them in the community touching these kids. We know for a fact, when I was coming up, we had La Villa, a vibrant community for African Americans. I'm talking people were coming from all around the country. So you could touch African American stars just walking through the community. You don't see that, especially today, because we have that classism. Before 1980, most of us was in the community. But now that we have the wealth, a lot of them don't live in our community, in private gates community, and they are not really touching the community.
Now, is this a personal issue with you? Because you're making some statements about them not touching the community, and I dare say that when I talk with a number of them, they're going to say that they have. They put on football clinics. They do a lot of things. And true, many of them aren't from here, and they do have residences on the South Side. But when they come to Jacksonville, that's where they're steered, because they can get a nice gated community, and they need to stay out of trouble. But when we look at somebody like Malavai Washington, who's had that tennis operation and started a great nonprofit here on the north side. Are you saying that you haven't met very many of them that have been engaged in the community, or generally they're just not engaged in the community?
They're not engaged in the community. Now, I know what Washington is doing, and he's doing a great job over there. But African Americans don't really run his organization. Now, I know these organizations, and I know a lot about these football players and all that stuff too, because I'm in the meetings. Yeah, see, I'm one of the most. I'm one of the few African Americans in this city that is civic engaged. You can pull my name up at these meetings. I'm on the charter revision of the last 3 years, that 30 years. I'm a Mr. Edward Exum, who used to be on the part of the Pullman Railroad, was my mentor. So I know a lot about not only Jacksonville, but this country. When you're talking about with this many football players, they only really involved in the community during the season. You don't hear anything about them walking in the community or in off season. You don't have them doing any shows. And then another thing, we are talking about STEM technology. I don't want people to be consumed with sports all the time, football, because really when it comes to the African American community, there's really only two sports that move us forward. In the Caucasian community right here in Jacksonville, they got over 20 different activities. That's a big difference. So when it comes to really football players or basketball players or any African American in that field, they are not engaged at all. And they make a big difference. So a lot of times, if you're a superstar and you are in the community, you don't even have to say nothing. When I was coming up, I met James Brown. That's why I got in the entertainment business. He was coming down La Villa. And I walked right up to him and stood right by him. So that made me want to get in the entertainment business. So when African Americans are not being exposed, it's hard for them to move forward. Because I know for a fact through research that African Americans are some of the powerful people in the world. Once they are exposed, when it comes to exposure, and I work with Kids Hope Alliance directly with the CEO, and there's opportunity, like I say, in the community, but when it comes to the church leaders, when it comes to the politicians, when it comes to the education community, they are not engaged in the community.
Well, let's move back to politics for a bit. And since a great deal of AAERTT's activity centers around Black leadership and who's in place, I mean, you do well, I know you realize this. The executive director of the JTA is an African-American male. The executive director of the Port Authority is an African-American male that came up through the ranks here in Jacksonville and has risen to where he is right now. There, I think we have the director of the Housing Authority has been an African-American male of one sort or another for the last 20 years, I think, has been in that position there. So, and granted, these are appointed positions, but they do respond to a board of directors that's multiracial, and that has put them in a place so they can direct activities and get a great deal done. But are you still of the mind that they're simply figureheads and they don't have any control of their fate and thus aren't able to direct anything to the African-American community specifically? Is that a contention of yours?
That's a fact. That's a fact of mine here. I'm at the board meeting with JTA. I'm in the JIA and the Port Authority. I'm at those meetings. Those opportunities here. See, our people with that classism, and let's talk about JTA for example. Ford, right, who come through Korean Brown to get his position, has no idea, because he's supposed to be in Jacksonville for 2 years before he got that position. And the operation, look at, he had made 10 different changes. He has disenfranchised African Americans on the north side when it comes to bus service, including the seniors. When it comes to the Port Authority, that many African Americans may be, we have a one or two figurehead, but they don't call no shots. Because of consolidation here, it make it possible for the Republicans to be in power. And they call the shots. Well, you got a few African Americans. When you talk about those African Americans, Ford is a Republican. You probably, I don't, like Stewart over there and a few other folks over the GIA, a lot of them guys are Republicans. Now, I have nothing against Republicans or Democrats, but the work that you're putting out disenfranchise the African American community.
Now, let's put a pin in it, then we'll go forward. You indicated that the JTA director and specifically and his board of directors have disenfranchised African Americans in terms of transportation services. How so?
Absolutely.
How so?
When Ford first came here, he changed the bus system, made it harder for seniors, and also went up on the rate. Now, but if it wasn't for Uber, it would be hard for a lot of the riders, who most of them is on the north side, to get to work.
Now you do realize that seniors can ride for free.
Yeah, I'm a senior myself.
Yeah.
But how long do you have to wait on the bus?
Well, not as long as you used to, but it's not,
okay. And also,
you need the app on your phone. And these days, if you've got the app on your phone, you know exactly when that bus is going to get there.
Yeah,
so you don't have to spend that kind of time out in the rain and the cold waiting for it like you had to do before. And the schedule is there, but the bus may run before and behind it. But if you can look on your phone, you can see when it's going to be there exactly, and you don't have to wait out there like you used to.
Okay, bring that up. When you're talking about underserved community, a lot of them don't understand that technology. They may have it on the phone. They can make a phone, especially seniors that's over 50 years old. They don't understand that technology.
Well, whose fault is that? Is that the fault of the JTA? Because we don't.
Yes,
we don't.
Part of it.
Are you saying our incompetency is the fault of the system? For how's the system going to make us more
competent? I'm glad you brought that up, because you mentioned about Ford. Ford, who was an African American, he should know. Seniors, you're receiving money from the feds. You get money from the state here. So a lot of things that JTA has done, especially to the African American community, to me, is a disgrace. And like I say, I'm in the meeting here. They talk about mobility and all the other stuff, like spending the money on Bay Street to put mobility. Ain't nobody on Bay Street. When you talk about getting in these communities out here, you supposed to do JTA supposed to talk to the community and find out what their needs are, and then they have to put those needs together with their requirements. So. But the most important thing is you are using taxpayer money. You should use it to the best to fulfill the needs of the community, not to yourself and your crony friends. And that's what problem that I have with JTA.
All right. Now, you have mentioned in your recent writings and beyond that about the issue. Obviously, we all have problems with the consolidation of the city and what it did, and many of the quote African-American leaders from that period of time have all given their mea culpas and admitted that they made a big time mistake in terms of voting for consolidation because of the amount of power that it took. Jacksonville would be a chocolate city for the most part had it not been consolidated. But here we are. What is your biggest concern among the African-American council members that we have? Now, recognizing that for the first time in history, we have two African-American males leading the city councilman. Both happen to be Republican, and both were elected at large. And of course, the other district council members that are there. What's your biggest hang up with African-American leadership, let's say again in politics, from the city council, and quite frankly, it's more like a city commission point of view?
Well, first of all, city council, African American city council should be advocating to get rid of those at-large members because it unbalanced the community. It unbalanced giving all the power really to the Republicans or the Caucasian community. See, and that's what the poke chop game back in the 50s and 60s, that was the main goal, was to put them in power. And those at-large members really bring no true values to the city council. And city council members, African American city council members, are not saying nothing about it. Because they know for a fact it's unbalanced. Also, African American city council members, the NAACP talked about a black caucus with the city council member, African American city council member. Not one replied, yes or no. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with a city council member say, I don't want to be involved with that. But I would at least take it to the community, to the community leaders, and let them get their input. I wouldn't just say no. If I was a city council member, no would not be part of my conversation, my narrative. I will be finding every way possible to help people, especially in the African American community, who has been disenfranchised in this city and country.
So are we just voters simply electing people to these positions, let's say the district seats? We're simply electing people because there's a seat to be filled and the person looks like a nice person to get elected there? Are we actually looking at the persons we're electing?
We're not looking. I hold that when it comes to civic engagement from the community, there is none. Now, when it comes to the popularity contest that's been running on for the last 52 years in the city of Jacksonville, African American are going with the popularity mentality, whether they like a person or not. They're not readers. So it's hard for them to understand who is the right person for that. As far as I'm concerned, I don't care if you African American, Black, Chinese, if you're doing the right job for the community, for the district, that's what's important to me. Not the popularity. For example, I'm gonna give you a quick example. It's the one in Gaffney. Gaffney family dynasty over there on the east side, been over there over 20 years. And you see no changes in that community on the urban core. Now, when you're talking about further north out there on Dunn's Avenue and out there, they doing pretty good out there. They growing. But when you're talking about the urban core, when it comes to unmet needs of consolidation, no, they just got to that. And it was Mr. Edward Exum who was filing lawsuits and doing all that to get that taken care of. A man almost 90 years old. That's appalling. And then you got all these African Americans in this city here, and we don't have no power in the city. Now, when I say no power, that doesn't mean that someone's holding us back. It's just that we are not organized to take advantage of these opportunities. And especially with our grassroots leadership, because they are so discombobulated, and with that classism, we're not able to move forward. But that still comes to your leadership. The African American political leadership are bougie people. They're only concerned about themselves.
So bourgeois, or is it that still that word is still there? So you would not be a big fan of all of the African American leaders who used to live on Sugar Hill off of Jefferson and Davis Street. Then I take it.
Right. Well, I grew up in that area. I had to work at daylight, carrying groceries over there to the project. Back in the day, I started that business. That was my first business at the age of 13. Mm-hmm. But yes, those same city council members, they may have two addresses because some of them own property. So they have an address on the urban core, but they don't live in them communities. I know that for a fact. Well,
I can harken back to one particular school board race and one particular school board member who had to get an address at her father's home in order for her to run for the school board. And she had some African Americans who helped her cover that up. until after the election was done, and nothing was ever said about it. She's moved on to the city council now as an established member of the elite. So you're saying, let's switch over. I got a few more minutes left here, and I want to get back to your mission, because one of the core things, again, that you're saying is that we have to, as African Americans and the community at large, we've got to do things for ourselves. Right. But you also seem to indicate that because the system is still rigged, i.e. what we talked about already, you only have 5 seats that are specifically African American, 5 districts, although the district in Arlington is changing rapidly because of the influx of immigrants over that and that Arlington district. It may be 6, but you're saying that we still have to do things for ourselves, but we're not doing it. Right. Are you seeing any light at the end of the tunnel with younger people who are going into businesses for themselves, who are doing some things to bring themselves up by the bootstraps, as you were, throughout the community? Are you seeing any evidence that these people are making a change without the use of politics? No, because one of the main reasons why you don't see much changes in that area, because most of them, when we did the research, there's about 2 million African American businesses in this country. 80% of them only have 1 employee. You cannot grow that way. So one of the pillars of the African American Economic Recovery think tank is collective economics, where African American, 3 or 4 of them, come together with subject matter skills to create opportunity for themselves. And as long as we, with that independent mentality, because we can start a business, doesn't mean that you're really a business owner or know how to run a business. You'll come out better when you got 3 or 4 people working together to strengthen the business and grow the community, because there are many opportunities. We know for a fact that every morning, 5 days a week, that every nationality come in our community and make money. That's a fact. Why are we not able to control 30 to 40% of it in our community? Now, in the state of Florida, we have one of the top lotto location in the state of Florida on Edgewood and Avenue B, that share station. Yes. Look at the money we spending. You can just sit there and see the money going through there. Well, we've always spent money on lotto. I mean, it put one of the major businesses in the African American community for years out of business when the state decided to get into gambling and brought lotto in, because all of us who grew up here and around knew where we could play the numbers, and we knew who the number men were. I remember betting my first quarter on the numbers and looking for the number man to come around every Friday, Saturday, Monday to tell us who won. So it put a lot of African Americans out of business when the state got in the lottery. So it's no surprise that a lot of them are still playing the numbers. We just call it the lottery now. And it's put a lot of us out of all of them out of business for the most part. Well, let me share this with you. My main concern with the one on Edgewood and Avenue B is not that they playing lotto. My concern that we don't own the share station. Well, whose fault is that though? The immigrant wave, exactly ours, because immigrant wave after immigrant wave has come through the Black community. As we go back in our early days, it was the Syrians and the Lebanese, and then and coexisting with them were the Chinese families who ran the restaurants and all of that. But the Syrians and Lebanese had all the convenience stores and all of that through. Now it is Pakistanis and Ethiopians now are in these convenience stores and running them. In fact, there's a new Ethiopian church that just opened up across I would say opened up, it's expanded across the street from the post office on Kings Road. That used to be a United Methodist church. Now it is an Ethiopian church, but that's the latest wave of immigrants that have come through. Now, Ethiopians are Africans, let's make no mistake about it, but they view us differently. when they're at our community. So whose fault is it that we're not in charge of these convenience stores, for example?
Us.
And why is that? Why is
Because of leadership. Say I'm city council member where I agree with grassroots people or not, I still will have a meeting with them and show them what's available and also take input. The first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take input from them, what your concerns are, what you want to see change, and then I'm gonna provide information to show what's available to them, and then let them know that you need to put your nickels and dimes together to create co-ops. Then we can manage those co-ops, and also we can leverage those dollars that we bring. So we got $1 million, then we got 10, according to the banking, when using banks and investors, we can come up with the 10%, then we can leverage that for other opportunity. But we have almost $5 million from the Northwest Trust Fund that's available to us. Most African Americans cannot do the paperwork. No matter how many times the think tank provide them the information, they are not capable of being honest and say, we don't know how to do this. That's when the think tank come in and help them. We plug the holes for them so they can grow their business. But there's opportunity for African Americans in Jacksonville, in the state, and the country.
The African American Economic Recovery Think Tank has a solid plan for redeveloping vital urban communities. We call it a holistic approach to creating sustainability growth with affordable multi-income homes, apartment, public and private charter schools, and so on. Has there been resistance to the presentation and the carrying out of your plan?
To be honest with you, you know who is using the plan? You want to go to the La Villa over there, the La Villa, Brooklyn?
Yeah.
They get that. You talking about what a DIA is using? They get that from the think tank. We wrote that almost 10 years ago. And they are using the exact same platform over there in La Villa, and they're using it today. I don't know if you're familiar with the area over there,
yeah,
but it's going. Right. And they're doing great things over there, and the opportunity for everybody. So you got mixed race community, right. You got mixed race income, the whole 9 yards. That's a good pillar for the city of Jacksonville. When it comes to the African American community, it took me 2 years to get through to Danford. I'm talking about just to have a conversation with him.
That's the Jacksonville Urban League Executive Director.
Today, when it comes to Ben Frazier, he would not even return a call. I have been trying to reach out to him for 3 years. Rumlin won't meet with me because he know that he need to sit down. He's in the way. But if you look at all those leaders, they've been around. Where is their receivables? That include the Urban League. Where are the receivables? There should be something in our community that we can hold our head up and be proud of, whether we own it or not. I'm talking about as far as leadership. So that's the biggest problem I'm having, is the fact that it looked like we got that class problem here where the bougie folks are concerned with they pick a big piece of the chicken and they want everybody else to have sorry about that. They want everybody else to eat hot dogs. And that's sad.
Well, do you think that you, because quite frankly, you are the organization from many, do you think you're viewed as more of a gadfly, a nuisance, than one who actually has a plan that others can latch on to?
No, that's basic here. My plan, the city of Jacksonville has it. Like I say, I'm in the charter revision for the last 30 years that I've been involved with the charter revision. I'm in the meetings. So my work is already out there. See, one thing about African American that's different than Caucasian, they go read about the think tank. They read about other information. Mm-hmm. So they fully aware. I'm one of the most respected African American when it comes to civic engagement, when it comes to the white community. The only issue I have is that the ignorance that my people have. I'm talking about leadership.
Right.
They are happy to have that big piece of chicken, and they're not concerned about anyone else. That's the problem.
Not concerned about anyone else.
Right. They're not concerned about when it comes to African American, with the amount of money we are spending. It's a crying shame that we are not able to create businesses, not jobs, because we know if you got a business here, a growing business of 10 or more employees, then you are creating jobs. And we are not able to do that. Even with our little mom and pop operation, you drive through there, it's not clean, it's not friendly when you go up there. They act like you owe them a favor. Well, leadership will change all that. Leadership can go out there. I'm talking about city council member can go out there and talk to people, engage them. Especially when we have Zoom technology today, it's a lot of ways you can reach out to people.
Do you see any brightness? Is the sun still shining a bit on the horizon, or is the sun just getting dimmer and dimmer?
Where from the information we have, about 20 years ago, 20 years ago, we was moving forward. We getting about 10 to 75% on every dollar. But today we all the way down to 53 cents on the dollar. So that means we are regressing. We are not moving forward. Now we'll see where they say the average African American make about $54,000 per year, but the average Caucasian make $250,000 to $300,000 a year. That's a big problem. Now, but also we need to stop the race, the gap race. We need to stop. We can never catch up to that. We should start our own race, just like we did with the baseball.
Yeah.
Stop our own race, and then that way we can have African American being able to move up. But when you going up against somebody who got $100 million and you got $1,000, then you got a problem. You can't compete with that. So what you want to do is start your own race, so you can have some people that come up to the top. And we're not doing that.
Stanley Scott, Managing Director of the African American Economic Recovery Think Tank, and one of the great minds in Jacksonville and North Florida and the country. It's just a pleasure speaking with you. This is part one, by the way.
Yes, sir.
Because we got a lot of deepness to get into. And,
yes, sir.
And I'm looking forward to having those conversations here soon. Your phone is beginning to ring, mine is ringing, so we're gonna get ready to answer the calls of the week. But it's been a pleasure. I'm glad you were able to do this today, and I'm looking forward to having you coming back.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, and a great job. And I've been knowing you a long time, over 30 years, and I'm proud of what you're doing, especially on WJCT.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
One added feature we're going to put on to my way of thinking is Fred's Reviews. It'll be an honest look at some of the motion pictures and some TV shows that are out that we've been doing for quite some time now, but we're going to add this on as a sort of a fun way to end these shows. But it's called Fred's Reviews, and of course you can see them at the website below, and on our Facebook, and on my Facebook page at least, Fred's Reviews. So here's a review of one of the more recent movies that has been out. We'll review some new ones and some old ones from time to time, but mostly new ones on HBO Max and Cinemax and Netflix and Prime, as well as those that are at the movies. But quite frankly, a lot of the great stuff is on the streaming services now. So we're going to review a lot of those, and many of them have become Oscar nominees. So stay tuned for Fred's Reviews. A triumphant film that will make you smile. I rate this 10 out of 10 stars. This feel-good movie is worth saving for the holidays. Will Smith controls the screen in this origin story of the top tennis players in the world and their father who had a plan.
Just be representing you. You're going to be representing every little black girl on earth.
I'm not going to let you down.
How could you? This world ain't never had no respect for Richie Williams, but they're going to respect y'all. You're going to walk out there with your head up. You are a champion, and the whole world knows. The most dangerous creature on this whole earth. It's a woman who knows how to think.
Yes, Daddy.
Ain't nothing she can't do. You gonna show them how dangerous you are? Venus and Serena gonna shake up this world.
Director Ronaldo Marcus Green and writer Zach Balin were blessed with a cast that brought to life a family that became world-renowned. Sanaya Sidney and Demi Singleton did not overplay their parts, and veteran actor Anjanou Ellis can add this to her resume as a major achievement. I'd watch it again. That's going to be it for this edition of To My Way of Thinking. I'm Fred Matthews. Join us again.